Hey everyone, Brad here. So I chose to do my project on the ethical dilemmas of predictive learning analytics. I chose to go for the critical review option, so I don't have much to show per se. So I just put together some quick slides here, just to make this slightly less boring, hopefully. So why did I pick this adventure? So I wanted it to kind of serve as a cautionary tale against being too reliant on data. And it seemed really relevant to my context working in an open and online institution. So the interest kind of stemmed from task 4B actually, where I focused on the ethical guidelines at the Open University. And I believe it was in the Sclater text that he raised the question of basically identifying students before they even begin their studies and targeting them with interventions, either motivational or directing them to specific resources before they even begin. Um, Now, this seems like it would be really helpful. I think students would agree it would be really helpful as well. I did start to wonder, though, as a student, um, how that might make you feel if you were able to infer that you had basically been identified for potential failure before you even begin your studies, especially in open institutions where, a lot of students are maybe have been away from education for a long time or didn't even, complete secondary school, so that might unintentionally be kind of demoralizing for them. So my guiding questions for my project were just what are some of the current challenges faced by institutions in implementing predictive learning analytics projects? What are the ethical dilemmas associated with them, and how can institutions guard against some of those ethical dilemmas? I won't get too much into the first point. I did start my project just by looking at some of the applications and challenges. I think we've discussed that a lot in the course, but I did want to start with a couple of cases that were interesting. Throughout my project, I included case studies just as examples that I came across. So the first one was at Mount St. Mary's University, where they were using predictive learning analytics for recruitment and admissions purposes. And they used it to identify and essentially cull freshman students who threatened their retention metrics in order to boost their national rankings. So this was definitely in the news for a while. The president at the time was quoting as wanting to drown the bunnies, I guess in reference to the freshman students. The provost and two faculty members who objected were either demoted or fired. Thankfully, the president did resign about a month later, and everyone else was reinstated and kind of got back to normal. The second case is a little bit more positive at Georgia State University. So they've dealt with a lot of challenges over the years. Shifting demographics is one. So they've gone from a 70% white student population in the 1980s to now a 70% non-white student population, a doubling in students eligible for financial aid over the last 2 decades, significant cuts in funding, and they brought in their admission requirements in 2012, which would hypothetically reduce your graduation requirements if you're making it easier to get in. Despite this, they've increased graduation rates by 23% since 2003, and eliminated equity gaps or close to eliminated them. And they did that by turning towards basically predictive learning analytics and data-driven decision making. So they used initiatives in advising and financial aid, recruitment, and they claim to have kind of been on the leading edge of this field by finding technology partners working on next stage solutions that had yet to hit the market. So they were kind of able to get ahead of other institutions. Now, of course, that can be risky for institutions as well. So you want to guard against just going for the newest and flashiest technologies. But for Georgia State University, it seems to have worked out well. So then I got into the ethical dilemmas. So these are the four that I focused on. I didn't get into student privacy just because that was kind of an obvious one that's applicable to all methods of learning analytics. I won't get into demotivation or invalid predictions too much, just because I think we've talked about those throughout the course. Yeah, just in general, so predictive learning analytics has the potential to offer numerous pedagogical and economic benefits, but may cause unintended harm if proper care is not used. As a relatively new field, learning analytics is still developing a holistic ethical framework, and researchers often borrow ethical guidelines from existing disciplines such as research ethics. but it is questionable whether these borrowed frameworks truly fit the context of learning analytics, especially considering its disruptive and transformative nature. So I'll just get right into loss of student autonomy. So autonomy can be defined as the ability to critically reflect on and act to realize or modify one's preferences. So we can see this especially in course recommendation systems, whether they're really recommendations or coercing students. So directing students to courses they are more likely to succeed in, can reduce the chance of failure, but can also result in a loss of academic rigor. At the course level, adaptive learning systems could potentially lean, you could argue it's basically spoon feeding automated suggestions, making the learning process less demanding, and finally recommending courses based on degree requirements. While of course that'll help students complete the program, it could also prevent exploring new interests and pursuing personal goals. So the case that I kind of examined a little bit in this area was the e-advising system at Arizona State University. So the purpose there was defined as basically identifying students whose ambitions bear no relation to their skills and essentially coerce them into changing their major if they're making insufficient progress, and basically treating students as simply bundles of skills that need to be matched to an outcome. So there's a delicate balance to be struck between guiding students towards a path to be successful while granting them the agency to make their own decisions. Next one is prejudicial categorization of students. So there's the potential to unfairly profile students, promote discriminatory attitudes or actions, and exacerbate power differentials. Discrimination can be understood in a few different ways, but the primary risk involves not treating students as individuals and assessing them based on group risk statistics. So by integrating or balancing more activity-based data will just in turn recognize students as individuals more. So the case I looked at here was through the Open University. I think I'm just going to skip this due to time. Finally, guarding against ethical dilemmas. So I haven't meant to sound pessimistic about utilizing predictive learning analytics. It would probably be more unethical to not utilize the data available to help students. So it does have great benefit. Institutions basically just must ultimately approach the use of predictive learning analytics with care to ensure that risks to students are minimized and focus is placed on the benefits to learners. They can do this by increasing their ethical literacy, so their functional literacy, how to use the software, critical literacy, basically just understanding the data limitations, and rhetorical literacy, so analyzing data rhetorically in terms of persuasion, power, and ownership. I know this image is a little bit hard to read, so this is by Ikowo and Palmer, just 5 guiding practices for ethical use. I'll just quickly list them off here. So have a vision and plan, build a supportive infrastructure, work to ensure proper use of data, design predictive learning analytics models and algorithms that avoid bias and meet institutional goals and improve student outcomes by intervening with care. So that's about it. These are just some of the key texts that I found. If you ever want some late night ethics readings to help put you to sleep, feel free. And yeah, that's about it for me. So hope everyone takes care, and best of luck in the summer. Thanks.